Big Apple Blitz with Anthony Rivardo and Matt O'Leary.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Big Apple Blitz. What's going on? I am Matt O'Leary, joined by Anthony Rivardo. How's it going, Anthony?
It's going good. I mean, listen, it was a really exciting free agency. The Giants got really busy, made a bunch of moves. Jets also made some pretty crucial moves. So we got a lot to talk about, and I'm thrilled to kind of dive into it.
Yeah, absolutely. They, on Monday, the last time we talked, we were discussing rumors, if we would see some guys retained. And now we have some movement, so I'm excited to get into that and figured we'd start with some guys the Jets and Giants lost first, then get into the signings. I know we were both big on, for the Jets retaining Bryce Huff, Giants retaining Xavier McKinney, and neither of those guys are back, Anthony.
No, and the McKinney loss does hurt, but of course, I'm glad on Monday, we did that in the morning before free agency kicked off. I'm glad that I mentioned that there were some rumblings of a Brian Burns trade because obviously it came to fruition. We'll dive into that a little bit more later in the show, of course, but obviously that affected their ability to retain Xavier McKinney. It is the reason that they let him walk. So you do have to take that into account. I would have liked to see Xavier McKinney come back, but it was a high price point. The Green Bay Packers really coughed up a lot of dough for him. So I guess you have to just kind of weigh the pros and cons of Brian Burns versus Xavier McKinney and then decide which move you prefer. And I think most Giants fans are going to pick the Brian Burns deal.
Yeah, no, exactly. On that one, still tough to see a guy, just entering their prime go at this point. It was big money. So I guess I'll flip it to you. Do you think it would have been worth it for the Giants to match that contract, let's say?
I do, but I don't think it would have been possible with the Brian Burns deal. So they had to pick one or the other, and that's really what it came down to. Had they not been able to make a trade for Brian Burns, then 100% they should have matched it. I still believe Xavier McKinney at his age with that price tag, yes, it was steep, and it's top 5 safety money. And you can debate whether or not you think Xavier McKinney is a top 5 player at his position. However, he's still only 24, and he's close enough to top 5 where in the next 2 years, he very well could be top 5 because he's only 24 years old, grow for 2 more years, see who retires or who kind of phases out of the position and is no longer top 5. I think that what the Green Bay Packers are paying him, if he continues to play and stays on the trajectory that he's at, he definitely will be worth that contract. So if I were the Giants, I would have made that deal with Xavier McKinney. However, I see why they didn't because they were working on that Brian Burns deal.
No, absolutely. And then on the Jet side of things, they lose Bryce Huff for a 3-year, $51 million contract. He goes to the Philadelphia Eagles, a team that your Giants will see twice a year. And I knew it was coming. We've talked about it for a while now. It was just kind of always felt like they were just going to let him walk in free agency. But I don't know how you're letting a homegrown pass rusher just entering his prime just leave for nothing and not get anything back for him. Best case scenario is they get a 4th round comp pick for him next year, which doesn't really help the 2024 Jets.
No, it doesn't help at all. I think that's a really big loss for the Jets. I think when you look at their defense, there's obviously a lot of talent. They still have good pass rushers across the board, but even still, Bryce Huff was still growing, kind of similar situation to McKinney as we discussed in the last show. Very similar players in their situations where, no, they're not necessarily the best player at their position, and they're going to get paid a lot of money for, Huff in particular hasn't played a full load of snaps in a season, only has played 500 something as his career high. So big question marks, but when you're looking at the talent, the age, and the value of that position, I thought that re-signing Bryce Huff made a lot of sense. Instead, I guess the Jets are going in a different direction.
Absolutely. They'll be betting on Will McDonald taking a step in year 2 and being able to fill his shoes. And it was something we previewed on Monday with the Eagles being linked to Huff. A good organization like Philadelphia, who's built a pretty good roster over the last, I don't know, you want to go back eight years or so. They've been doing it. They won a Super Bowl in 2017, went back in 2022 after moving on from their quarterback and Carson Wentz. And Howie Roseman and the Eagles just trust a little bit more of their value and evaluations on these guys than Joe Douglas and the Jets right now. And now it just feels like a mistake. We'll see. Obviously, it's going to be dependent on Will McDonald and just how they fill that role. But yeah, a little bit of a red flag and a little frustration on day one with him leaving. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I'm a little frustrated too because they let him go within my division, so now I got to watch the Eagles probably developing Bryce Huff into an absolute stud. I mean, I feel like a lot of the times when they sign players who maybe have a little bit of an unproven factor to them in free agency, somehow they get them to prove it. And that's my fear with Bryce Huff, is that he's going to develop into a really solid pass rusher for the Eagles. But thankfully, the Giants matched pass rusher move with pass rusher move. So hopefully Brian Burns fills that void for the Giants and can kind of be that spark plug on our defense, maybe how Bryce Huff will be on the Eagles defense.
Absolutely. Both our teams made trades. We'll get into that in the second half of the show, but we talked about some guys that, some of the bigger names that were lost for both of these teams, but they were also active in adding guys in free agency. The New York Giants, we have Jermaine Illuminor on the graphic. John Runyon gets brought in. Let's start there with some Giants ads and your thoughts on those contracts and those players.
Yeah, one of my favorite signings that the Giants made was Jermaine Illuminor. It just made way too much sense for them to go ahead and sign him. Listen, he was with the Las Vegas Raiders the last couple of years. Is he a top offensive tackle in the NFL? No, but is he a high quality and consistent starter? Yes. Do the Giants have any of those? Maybe one in Andrew Thomas. So they needed to get more quality players, average players in this building. And with Evan Neal continuing to struggle through the first 2 seasons of his career, they needed to give him some sort of competition. Jermaine Illuminor, perfect. He knows our offensive line coach. He's been with him on 2 separate stints, most recently with the Raiders. Carmen Bricolo was the coach over there. And if you go way back to when Jermaine Illuminor was with the New England Patriots, Carmen Bricolo was also the offensive line coach there. So they've worked together through the majority of their respective careers. So now reuniting here with the Giants makes too much sense. Jermaine Illuminor knows the blocking scheme, knows the coaching style. So that makes it kind of a match made in heaven. Plus, it's one of those situations where value meets need. It's a 2-year, $14 million contract. And I mean, what need is greater for the Giants than offensive line outside of maybe quarterback you can bring up? But that offensive line needed to be fixed. And I think this is a player who, again, you're not getting top 5 player at your position, but you're also not paying that. You're paying a very cheap contract to get a quality starter to compete with Evan Neal. And if Evan Neal can't win this job, he moves over to guard, and then you have Jermaine Illuminor as your starting tackle. If for some reason Evan Neal steps into training camp, looks amazing, and wins that job, all right, now you have great depth, which is important because the Giants had a lot of injuries last year, and you have a really good swing tackle in Jermaine Illuminor. So a flexible signing, a great signing. This is one of my favorites of the offseason.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you. I think it's, solid money on the AAV right at $7 million. He is a starting capable tackle. Way too early guess, but I think he will end up starting unless you mentioned Evan Neal comes in and is just spectacular. That was going to be my question for you is, do you think they move him over to left guard now with the signing of John Runyon? And I guess getting into the next guy the Giants had.
Yeah, so that's been kind of a topic of debate with Giants fans, who starts at which spot. Evan Neal has never played right guard in his career, but when he was at Alabama, he played a season at left guard, and he played it pretty well. So the thinking was that he would move over to the left side, play with Andrew Thomas over there, and play left guard, and the Giants would sign a right guard. However, they actually signed someone who is more of a left guard in John Runyon. This past season, he played right guard for the Packers, didn't play very well at right guard. If you look at his stats in his career prior, when he was playing his natural position of left guard, much better player. So the thinking is now maybe the Giants move Evan Neal into right guard and they have him try to learn another new position, which has its pros and cons for sure. And then John Runyon takes over at left guard where he's played the best of his career at. So I think it'll be an interesting training camp battle there. I'd like to see Evan Neal at left guard, but not if it means that we're going to get the worst version of John Runyon, who we just signed to a 3-year, $30 million contract. So, it's a little bit of a training camp problem, I would say. This is something that we can't get the answer to now, but eventually I think we'll get the answer to it. And, hopefully, however it shapes out, it allows Evan Neal to start playing better football because we desperately need that.
No, absolutely. And for Runyon in particular, that's a name that a lot of Jet fans were linking to the Jets, who needed multiple positions on the offensive line, guard being one of them. They eventually signed a guard. We'll get to that in a little bit. But with Runyon, everyone thought like, oh, the Aaron Rodgers connection can play left or right guard. That would make a lot of sense. And I thought it was a fair deal for him, at 3 years, $30 million. And, just kind of for the Giants, it feels like I think they at minimum raised the floor of this offensive line. I don't know if they got, like you said, Runyon and Luminor aren't like top of the line at either one of their spots, but they're serviceable starting caliber offensive linemen, which the team desperately needed.
Yeah, and listen, we had a lot of conversation in previous episodes, and I've talked a lot about it on Fireside Giants, where I thought that the Giants were going to go all in on one of the top guards on the market, like a Mike Onwenu or Robert Hunt. They didn't go that route, and it's primarily because they went the Brian Burns route. So if you guys remember in the last episode, or if you saw the short that we made from the last episode, I mentioned my bold prediction for the Giants was that they were going to make some sort of a splash and sign someone in the trenches, either on the offensive or defensive line. I'm glad I threw that in there because they made their splash on the defensive line, signing someone to 18 million AAV or more. They didn't do it on the offensive line. Instead, they go cheaper there. However, I agree with you. They raised their floor. At the worst case, this offensive line is better now on paper than it was last year. They've filled those holes. Now they just need those players to step up and play better and hope that some of their young talents take steps forward, like an Evan Neal and like a John Michael Schmitz at center. If that happens, this offensive line should be like a night and day difference from last year. But again, I'm not expecting this to be a top 5 unit in the NFL, but also, do you really want to handcuff yourself to a player like a Robert Hunt at $100 million? I don't know if that is the smartest thing for the Giants to do. So I think that the route that they took, spending money on a pass rusher and then, kind of just adding these stopgap bridge players on the offensive line to raise that floor, probably the best strategy. And I'm definitely happy with the approach that they took.
Now, switching gears slightly from the offensive line, but they lose Saquon Barkley to the Philadelphia Eagles and sign Devin Singletary. What are your thoughts on the pivot in free agency from Saquon Barkley?
Yeah, I knew Saquon Barkley was a goner. They really didn't show much interest at all in extending him this offseason. They tried last year, and they offered him a deal that was competitive, but not where the Eagles went. And I knew the Giants weren't going to go up there. They weren't going to exceed $10 million per season. He gets over $12 million per season. So that I'm okay with. I was already prepared for that. It sucks that he's going within the division, especially to the Eagles. Like, I hate the Eagles, and I hate the fact that Saquon's going to be playing there. But I still think my opinion stands of him where he's a great player, but he's not what he used to be. He's got a lot of mileage on him, a lot of injuries in his career. I think that it's fine letting him leave and going with a younger, healthier option who's still really efficient in Devin Singletary, especially at the lower price tag that Singletary came with. So I really like that signing. I think you can get very similar production out of Singletary. You're not getting the flashiness, you're not getting the big name. It's not the same level of talent, but you can get very similar production out of Singletary. Plus, if you add in maybe a rookie in the middle rounds, or I know the Giants were linked to AJ Dillon, if they do a little bit of a committee here. Personally, I like running back by committee. I don't think that having one workhorse superstar is the way to win in this NFL. So I'm hopeful that the Giants can get it done with Singletary plus one or two other backs, have a nice committee. And I think that that's a really good way to replicate the production lost by Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, I think, and for Singletary, I think he's been productive in a limited role. Like, he's not going to be a guy who's going to be a bell cow back, but in a situation where if they draft somebody in the first, not in the first round, obviously, but somewhere second, third, fourth round and want to pair him with Singletary, there's a chance that could be a pretty nice backfield for the New York Giants. And, it's kind of just a different approach. It's the running back by committee rather than paying, the big money for a star quarterback. Running back. But speaking of quarterback, that's what I want to ask you about. So Giants signed Drew Lock as a backup, same quarterback class as Daniel Jones, which I thought was funny because one of my good buddies who's a big Giants fan, he liked Drew Lock a lot better from that quarterback class when they ended up taking Daniel Jones. And not that either's worked out crazy well for in their career so far, but jokingly texted him and he was excited about it. What's your thoughts on Drew Lock coming into the Giants?
I think it gives the Giants a solid backup and not much more. This doesn't affect their draft plans first and foremost, which is why I like it. Drew Lock does not prevent you from drafting any of the top quarterbacks in this class, but he does give you a quarterback who is healthy and ready to go for all of OTAs, training camp and the regular season, which is really important. I think that's something a lot of Giants fans overlook, is the fact that Daniel Jones, yes, he might be ready for week 1, and the Giants very well could be planning on having him be the starter for the start of the 2024 season. However, they need a healthy body in there, more than one healthy body in there. Yeah, they have Tommy DeVito, but they need more quarterbacks who are ready during OTAs to go through the walkthroughs and help install the new blocking scheme that the new offensive line coach is implementing, any changes to the offensive game plan that Mike Kafka might have. They needed somebody in there who can learn any nuances that are being added to this offense from start to finish of the offseason. So it's very important that they sign Drew Lock now and have a quarterback in place so that Daniel Jones isn't just rusty or missing certain things or not used to certain things in the offense by the time week 1 comes around. So even if Jones is starting week 1, I'm happy that they brought somebody in who has some upside in Drew Lock. He's not great. I mean, he throws a lot of picks, but he also takes chances downfield. Giants need to take more chances downfield, need more explosive plays. So it's very important that they have a quarterback in there to go through all those walkthroughs and all those training activities, and also has some high upside as a backup.
Yeah, and not crazy costly. Filled in okay last year for Seattle when Geno was out. So yeah, it's not a bad backup quarterback pivot for the Giants. Is there anyone else we missed so far that you wanted to go over before we transition to the Jet side of things?
Couple other Giants signings. Jalen Mills gives them depth at safety after losing Xavier McKinney. Don't really care much for the Isaiah McKenzie signing. That's back of the roster. Maybe he doesn't even make the team, and we'll see what they do at CB2. That's the big question mark left over. But other than that, I think they address some big needs. We'll talk about the Brian Burns trade later, and I'm feeling pretty good about what the Giants have done so far.
How about this bold prediction from the chat? Jersey Card says, I could see the Giants back in the playoffs. Do you feel that way after free agency so far?
After free agency, no. Check back in with me after the draft, because I've made this argument where in 2023, the Giants, I thought, were 3 plays. You could find 3 plays that they were away from making the playoffs last year. Had they had 1 play go their way against the Jets, that's 1 win. 1 play go their way against the Rams, the 2-point conversion, that's a win. And of course, the Buffalo Bills, if they score either of those 2 times they were on the 1-yard line, that's a win. Those 3 wins give them the same record as the Packers, gives them the tiebreaker because they beat the Packers. Packers would miss the playoffs. Giants would go in. So all 3 of those plays, though, that I'm mentioning, look at them. The quarterback was the difference. Brian Burns is not going to make the difference there. Jermaine Illuminor doesn't make the difference there. A quarterback does. So check in with me after the draft. If the Giants do have a new quarterback in place, who I think is an upgrade over Daniel Jones year 1, I might agree with you. Right now, I probably don't agree with you. I still think that this roster is a little bit away from competing.
There we go. All right, to the Jet side of things we go. We'll start with the free agent signings, and then obviously we'll get into both the trades that these teams made. But right now, I think the biggest one that they've done is John Simpson, the left guard from the Baltimore Ravens. Not the direction that I anticipated the Jets going at guard. A little bit lower on the pecking order from guys that I was looking at. There's some things that I like about him and some things that scare me a little bit. One of the things that I like, I think they got him on a pretty good value contract to be a starter, which is a good thing. He's still young. He's a mauler in the run game. He's a part of a very good offensive line in Baltimore. But on the negative side, penalties have been an issue for him the 2 years that he started, one in Vegas and one in Baltimore. He's had double-digit penalties each of those years. And anytime I bring that up, I usually get some pushback saying, well, you're going to get a lot of holding penalties when Lamar's your quarterback and extending plays. True, but he also was penalized a lot with Derek Carr as his quarterback 3 years ago. So it's not a 1-for-1 situation. If it ends up that he's the 5th best offensive lineman on the starting offensive line, I think it's fine. It's not really a move, though, at the guard spot where I'm going like, oh my God, this has been like fantastic, amazing signing for the Jets, but I don't think it was horrible. It was okay add to a huge position of need on the line.
I like this signing for the Jets because I like the price tag. 2 years worth up to $18 million. So you're talking $9 million AAV. When you look at where that guard market went, it makes sense that both the Giants and the Jets went with those cheaper price points and John Runyon, John Simpson. So I like this signing. I think that it gives the Jets stability. Again, he started all 19 games for Baltimore last season, all the way through the playoffs at left guard. Doesn't miss time, is a consistent and reliable player. Again, is he a huge upgrade? Is he one of the best players in the league at his position. No, he's not that similar to the John Runyon signing for the Giants. However, you are getting dependability, somebody who can be out there for you for the full season. I know that was kind of the argument with Laken Tomlinson. At least he doesn't miss time with injuries. He's always out there. Of course, the Jets cut him anyway because of cap issues. But I think that this is kind of a similar player who dependable is going to be out there for you for all those games. Again, isn't elite, but he's very good. And with the way that that guard market was going, everybody was getting paid. I mean, 2 years ago, John Simpson's probably not getting this amount. John Runyon, same thing. But now these players at this talent level are going to get that amount just because you got Kevin Dotson signed, what was it, 16 or 18 million per year. You had Onwenu up at 19. You had, of course, what's his name from the Dolphins, Robert Hunt with 20 million a year. So the way that all that money went, the guard market exploded. So I like that this signing is affordable for the Jets, but also serves as a pretty big upgrade at a huge position of need.
No, it is an upgrade too. And while it's not that John Simpson was my favorite target on the market, but it absolutely is an upgrade over Laken Tomlinson, who really struggled for the Jets the last 2 years. And the Jets kind of got pushed around a little bit in the run game, especially after injuries last year. And I think his physicality and nastiness is going to, the Jets are going for that identity. And when we talk about the trade, more on that in a little bit with Morgan Moses, but I think the Jets are going for a new identity in their run game. So wanted to, bring that one up. I think my favorite overall free agent signing is Tyrod, former backup quarterback for the New York Giants. They bring him in on a 2-year deal. I love it. I said this a few times about Tyrod Taylor. I liked his game going back to Buffalo. Good spot starter. Only concern is injuries, but still has a pretty deep ball. Could extend the play with his legs a little bit. I know you've seen Tyrod a lot over the last couple of years. What do you think of him as a backup for Aaron Rodgers?
I think Tyrod Taylor is arguably the best backup quarterback in the NFL. Just when you look at what he can provide for you in those spot starts, he doesn't turn the ball over much. He's smart. He's got a great deep ball. He likes to take chances. He creates big plays. He's accurate. The problem is the injuries. I mean, he gets hurt almost every time he steps on the field, which is not ideal for a backup quarterback. But if you need him to start a game or two, let's say Rodgers has, some sort of tweak in his ankle or his shoulder, and he misses 1 to 2 games in the middle of the season, that's where Tyrod Taylor steps in. That's perfect. Now, do you want Tyrod Taylor starting the entire season for you? No. Can he? If he stays healthy, I think he can at a quality level. But again, he's not a starting quarterback. He is a really good backup, though. I like his game. I like the way he plays. And honestly, I wish that the Giants had more money to spend and they could have brought him back. I think he's perfect, especially as a bridge quarterback for a young guy coming in. He's been a bridge for some of the best young quarterbacks in the NFL right now. I think Justin Herbert, Josh Allen, I think there might be one other out there. I know he was on the Texans. I don't know if it overlaps with the CJ Stroud, but I really like Tyrod Taylor and what he brings to the game. I think that as Aaron Rodgers' backup, you can't really ask for too much better.
No, absolutely not. And I mean, it was an upgrade. The Jets had basically a traffic cone back there as QB2 this past year, whether it was Zach Wilson or Trevor Siemian or Tim Boyle, like the massive upgrade there. They needed to go the veteran route, figured they would on day one. And once, Jacoby Brissett goes to a spot where he could potentially play in New England, Gardner Minshew goes to a spot where he could potentially play in Vegas. To me, I think Tyrod best realistic option there. So I'm like I said, I'm a really big fan of this one. And it seems like Tyrod was getting hurt against the Jets the last couple of years. So now maybe with him playing for the Jets, that luck changes. I don't know. I might be coping a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so for your sake because, listen, the injuries are really frustrating. The Giants should never have been down to QB3 with, of course, Tommy DeVito going out there. I love the Tommy DeVito storyline. I loved watching him play for those 4 weeks or whatever that he was in there. But Tyrod Taylor does need to learn to protect his body a little bit better. He's already in his 30s. His career is honestly dwindling to its end. So I don't know if it's too late for him to learn, but if he could protect his body better, that would be huge. But hopefully some of the new additions on the offensive line help him stay upright and not take as many hits.
There we go. Let's go talk about the 2 defensive line adds for the Jets. One, Javon Kinlaw, former 49er. He kind of takes over the Solomon Thomas, former first-round pick from the 49ers that was there under Saleh coming over to the Jets role. He got paid a little bit more than I thought he was going to get paid. 1 year on a deal at $7.25 million. I was kind of hoping it'd be in that like $3 to $4 million range. We saw earlier today, Quentin Jefferson signs with the Browns. So Kinlaw is going to essentially be that replacement next to Quinnen Williams. And then they also add Lakai Fotu, a kind of run stuffer from the Cardinals. Don't know a ton about Fotu other than like rotational piece going to be in there on early downs. That's going to be about it. But for Kinlaw, there's some pass rush upside there. I just thought the contract was a little bit more than what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, everybody's calling it a massive overpay. I think that I'd probably agree. It's a lot of guaranteed money in the deal for Kinlaw as well. And honestly, when you look at his career, missed a lot of time in 2021 and 2022. So you hope that he's reliable and that he's on the field. But I think I'd agree with you in the sense that, the Jets probably could have saved their money, gone elsewhere, and maybe not given so much to Kinlaw. And correct me if I'm wrong, is Kinlaw the one that's had character concerns, red flags off the field?
He did have some questionable comments that he made to a reporter.
Okay.
Yeah, he didn't like a story that came out, and he went after him on a live stream, and it was interesting.
Gotcha. Yeah, I didn't know if that factors into Jets fans' feelings on the deal at all, so I figured I'd point that out there. Couldn't remember if that was Kinlaw or not, but yeah, I mean, it's an okay signing. I guess, there's familiarity there with coming over from San Francisco, and that's probably why he was the pick for Saleh and his staff, but probably not the best deal possible out there for the Jets.
Last one before we get into the trades here. They needed to do it. I know it's not sexy to talk about, but Thomas Morstead, the punter, back on a new 2-year deal, worth just over $5 million. Special teams matters, man. I'll go to my grave saying that. Teams lose playoff games all the time because of poor special teams. The Jets retained Craig Zerloin. They retained Thomas Morstead. They were a top 3 special teams unit last year. I think it was important to bring both those guys back. Hopefully Morstead's not punting as much this year as what he was last year, but for that money, I think no brainer.
I'd agree with you. I mean, listen, the Giants wish that they had a punter of that caliber. I think most teams do. So bringing back Morstead is a no-brainer, like you said. I think when you've got a good special teams, you got to do everything you can to maintain that core. You said it right there. A lot of teams lose playoff games due to poor special teams play. And honestly, I saw the Giants lose a couple regular season games due to bad special teams play this past season. So don't discount the fact that it makes a big difference in preseason. Even in preseason, the Giants lost a preseason game due to bad special teams play against the Detroit Lions. It just always makes an impact. It's always important to have a good special teams, and I think that the Jets prioritizing that, it's something that is sneaky, and maybe fans might question it like, oh, I'd rather invest that money here or there, and shore up the defensive line or something a little bit more. But realistically, when you get into the regular season and you're in those clutch moments and you're in crunch time late in a game, if your special teams doesn't make a specific play that's routine to most teams and not routine to your team, that's the difference between winning and losing. So you got to make sure that you bring in those good guys and you keep them long term.
Absolutely. Let's get into that Brian Burns trade. Obviously, you dropped the hint on Monday's show that the Giants were interested in it. Was worried about the potential trade compensation going the other way. After the trade goes through, what are your thoughts on it now?
I don't like that they gave up pick number 39. I wish it was pick number 47, but that's the pick that they had to give up in order to get the deal done. The contract is massive, and I think when you look at Brian Burns' career, he maybe has not lived up to a contract of that caliber, but obviously the potential is there for him to, and for him to exceed it. He's been playing on what's been a really bad Carolina Panthers team for years. The hope is he comes in here with the New York Giants. They've got Dexter Lawrence in the middle. That opens up more one-on-ones for Burns. They've got Kayvon Thibodeau on the other side. Opens up more one-on-ones for Burns. Also, Burns opens up more one-on-ones for Thibodeau. So the hope is that this is kind of the move that opens up everything for the defense, especially on the defensive line. And it very well could be. But I'm not going to be, a homer or have too much bias here and say that this is a trade without its risks, because I think that there are some risks involved. And I think that the Giants having 2 second-round picks would have been a massive positive for them going into this draft. This receiver class is super deep. If they want to trade up for a quarterback, they had 2 second-round picks to do so. Now they don't. It's not exactly easy for them to maneuver their way through this draft now without that extra second-round pick. So I'm a little bit weary about that. However, the one takeaway, the Giants got a lot better. They have a much better defensive line now. They did upgrade here. So it's a good deal all in all. But overall, my final thoughts on it will come after the draft. Like I mentioned for some of the other deals, it's really important that the Giants capitalize on what they have in this draft in terms of their capital and make the necessary moves to fortify their roster. But the Brian Burns deal, it's exciting. I do like a lot about it, but I do have some concerns about it. I mean, listen, he's a really good player. Is he double-digit sacks every single year type player? That remains to be seen. He needs to be put into a better environment. Maybe the Giants are that environment, but if they're not and he continues to kind of plateau at that 8 sack to 10 sack range, maybe it won't be the best deal long-term. But right now, I'm really excited about it. Just waiting to see what they do at the draft.
There we go. We got a super chat. So I want to pull up Armani AD chimes in, says, showing some love to the channel. I am a Talking Jets supporter. What's up, Matt? Although I don't know your style yet, Anthony, I am liking the show. Well, we appreciate you hopping over and joining in. We are still new on this journey, only about a month into this new show where we go twice a week, Mondays and Thursdays. But it's fun. I've enjoyed doing it so far with getting the Giants perspective and the Jets perspective, a place where both fans could kind of come together here and just talk some New York football. I've loved it.
Yeah, me too. And thanks for the super chat. Appreciate you kind of giving me some praise there. Still new to the Jets, learning my way through it, but have my good opinions of them and have a good enough knowledge to talk about it. So happy to do so. And I think that it is a lot of fun just kind of taking a look at New York football in general and seeing how these two teams are setting themselves up for the season. Because, I mean, listen, Jets fans want to be better than Giants fans. Giants fans want to be better than Jets fans. Of course, it's like a pseudo rivalry. It's not a real rivalry, but of course that in-town rivalry is there, and I think that it's a lot of fun to take a look at these two teams, compare and contrast them, and especially during this offseason, see who's kind of winning the race in the offseason is fun.
Absolutely. And with Brian Burns in particular, getting back to Burns here, my thoughts on the deal. There is definitely, as you said, there is some risk involved giving up the pick and the contract. He's going to turn 26 next month, so he's still young. It's not like you're doing this for 28, 29 or over 30-year-old edge player. Something I've maintained is sometimes I think it takes edges a few years to really get going. And he did have that 12.5 sack season in 2022. Last year was such a disaster in Carolina. I almost give him a little bit of a pass, and he wasn't awful. Like an 8 sack season there was, pretty good. But I think really for me, what it's more about is getting that guy who has the 10 sack potential on the other side of Kayvon Thibodeaux with Dexter Lawrence in the middle. I think that really opens up. It's a strong defensive line that could beat you in multiple ways. It's going to open up not only the interior with Lawrence, but also Kayvon on the other side. I think, it's going to be a dangerous unit, and he's someone who plays a ton of snaps. I was looking at Burns' snap counts, 83% this year, 87 the year prior. He's someone who's the Giants could just toss out there and, let him go to town on early downs or on third down, obvious passing situations. So as you said, it's kind of TBD to before we get the full picture of how this team's going to look after the draft and as you get closer into training camp and things like that. But I think there's potential here. I think it could be a good move for the Giants.
And I agree with that. It's just 40 total pressures. I would have liked the Giants to go find somebody that's had 60 total pressures this past season. 40 is a little bit low. So, I mean, according to Pro Football Focus, that is. But there's no denying how much impact you can get from a guy like Brian Burns. And again, you mentioned it. He's only turning 26 this offseason. So a lot of room to grow, a lot of potential still there. And I think that him in this defense with Dexter Lawrence and Kayvon Thibodeaux, if everybody plays well, all three of those guys stay healthy and they play in tandem with one another, then you can definitely see Brian Burns reach that potential and take that step forward. So there's a lot of upside here. The potential is kind of limitless now with him, Thibodeaux, and Dexter Lawrence. And one other talking point that I think a lot of fans also gloss over is the fact that improving this pass rush helps improve the secondary. Losing Xavier McKinney, having no answer at cornerback too, right? The Giants still haven't signed anybody there, and it seems like all their options have kind of signed elsewhere. But getting that pass rush bolstered and having some extra juice going after the quarterback gets the ball out of the hands quicker, less time for the cornerbacks and the safeties to get beat in coverage. So it helps in that respect as well. The Giants, rather than investing a lot in their secondary, investing a lot in their trenches in the front seven, and hopefully that results in just a better pass defense in general, getting after the quarterback, applying pressure, creating some errant throws for the defensive backs to capitalize on, all that. So tremendous benefits to this deal, but you just hope that it does reach its potential, because if it doesn't, it can definitely come back to bite the Giants because of how much they invested into it.
Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Would you rather have done the Burns trade and contract, or sign the Bryce Huff deal and keep the second round pick? Because I know you were like, semi-concerned about Huff's lack of snap counts and if he could take that next step as a more regular player. So put you on the spot. Which one would you have rather had?
I think I would go Brian Burns, which might be surprising because of the tone that I had about, the second round pick. But what I'll say is, at least with Burns, you mentioned it. He's on the field for a bunch of snaps. He plays a lot. He can handle the full season workload. With Bryce Huff, I had my big question mark about that. And I feel like Huff going to the Eagles is going to take that step forward and become that full-time pass rusher and be a really good player. But going to the Giants, where I don't know what this defensive scheme is going to look like with this new coordinator and with how the Giants have been in recent years, I don't know if this is the environment where he is going to take that step forward. But with Brian Burns, someone who's more established, has played that full season and has played so at a high level, is now going into this new defense with these players. That seems like it's more likely that he takes a step forward and continues to play at a high level than maybe Huff reaching a new height here with the Giants. So I'm going to say Brian Burns. I think you could go either way on that one. I think a better question that I'll kind of leave for Giants or maybe even Jets fans to ponder here is, would you have rather Brian Burns at $30 million or Saquon Barkley and Xavier McKinney for $30 million? Because those two contracts combined went to $30 million per season, and Brian Burns also went to $30 million per season. I think me personally, I would go the Brian Burns route, which is the route that the Giants went compared to the Barkley and McKinney route. But there is an argument to be made for at least the McKinney contract. I think the Barkley contract, personally, I actually think that the Eagles overpaid on that one. But Brian Burns at $30 million, it's a steep price tag. But yeah, in this kind of comparison situation, I'd probably lean towards going with the Burns trade.
Totally fair. I would go with the Burns too over the McKinney and Saquon deals. I agree with you there. Let's get to the Jets trade. They made a deal yesterday. Morgan Moses, a familiar face. He was a New York Jet in 2021. Filled in at right tackle for them that year after Mekhi Becton got hurt in week 1 and George Fant moved back over to the left side of the line. He was really solid for them, but wanted a chance to start, signs a 3-year deal in Baltimore, was a plus starter there for the last 2 years. And the New York Jets go out and trade a 4th-round pick and a 6th-round comp pick for a 4th-round pick in Morgan Moses. So they move back 20, I think it was 22 spots in the 4th round, give up a 6th-round comp pick for a starting caliber right tackle who is $5.5 million against the cap. To me, this is a no-brainer. I talked about my favorite free agent signing so far being the Tyrod Taylor signing, but favorite move overall, I think by far, is this trade for the Jets.
Yeah, I love this deal for the Jets. It's a player with familiarity with the team, the culture in the locker room, everything like that. But also, I just think that this is a massive upgrade and it gives you a lot of flexibility for the draft, kind of like what we were discussing earlier. You want to set yourself up for the draft through free agency, create some flexibility. I don't think that the Jets are pigeonholed into going offensive tackle in the 1st round anymore because they've added so many pieces on the offensive line, with John Simpson, now with Morgan Moses, 2 of these players from the Baltimore Ravens. They have familiarity with one another. I think that's exciting as well. So you're kind of shoring up a few massive positions of need up front. Maybe the Jets could go playmaker in the 1st round if the right player falls into their lap. If a Romo Dunes or Dunze or Malik Neighbors somehow slides to 10, now the Jets can at least consider that possibility. But it also opens up the possibility where you get that left tackle. If you get Joe Alt in the 1st round, your offensive line is pretty much set, ready to go. Hopefully the rookie performs well as a rookie. Sometimes it takes linemen a long time to develop, but Joe Alt is that good where you're probably confident in him starting at left tackle for you as a rookie. So you have him. You got Morgan Moses, John Simpson, of course, a couple other players. So I think that overall it's a massive upgrade on the offensive line, and it gives the Jets so much flexibility in the draft.
Yeah, it's a great point. And go back. I hope he's still in here. First State Jets said a few minutes ago. Jets in good spot now. Right tackle, right guard, left guard have been shored up. Add a free agent left tackle, and we have the ultimate draft flexibility. That's right.
Exactly.
To me, it's really dependent on who it is. Like if the Jets sign David Bakhtiari, to me, that doesn't do anything because of the amount of time that he's missed. I think you'd have to draft somebody or even add another veteran in there before I go back to looking at a different position in the draft. But Tyron Smith, yes, he's missed time, but then it's dependent on how they feel internally about a player like Carter Warren, who they drafted in the mid rounds last year, who came in and started and looked okay as the year went on. If they like his progression, maybe they feel comfortable with him playing, filling in a couple games if Tyron Smith misses time. And then that opens it up for you at pick number 10 for, a Brock Bowers or a Dunze or whatever weapon you want to go. It's interesting. I don't think I'm there yet to say like definitively, yes, this absolutely means they're going to, avoid tackle. I think you laid out really one of my more favorite options for the Jets is if Joe Alt falls a little bit, can they package their second round pick next year to jump up and grab Joe Alt on the left side? Because the line of Alt, Simpson, Tippmann, AVT, and Moses, that sounds really solid to me. I'd sign up for that in a second.
That sounds like a complete 180 from where they were at last year. Like that's a massive improvement from the 2023 offensive line. So I'm in agreement with you. I think that Joe Alt, he might go as high as 5, but if he starts to slip and if there's a run on playmakers or quarterbacks, whatever, and he starts to fall a little bit further, the Jets can move up like 2 to 3 spots. Maybe you're talking up to 8 or 7 to get up there. They draft Joe Alt, steal him before anybody else has the opportunity to. I think that you make that deal all day and you give yourself that starting 5 that you just laid out on the offensive line, because not only is that like a really solid line for 2024, but a few of those pieces are still young and growing. So you have at least 3 of those offensive line spots with players on rookie deals and continuing to grow. And I think that's ultimately important as well. So not only building for right now, but also for the future. Of course, Jets in that win now mindset with Aaron Rodgers here, but you also have to prepare for life after Rodgers, especially considering some of the controversies with Aaron Rodgers right now. Will he even play this year? I don't know if we want to dive into that, but we'll put a pin in that one. We'll see with Aaron Rodgers, but you do have to get some young players in on this line. They have a couple. Taking that tackle in the first round gives them flexibility for this year, but also gives them a long-term solution, especially at the blind spot if you do land a guy like a Joe Alt.
No, absolutely. Darren chimes in and says, loving the content, guys. You're killing it. Mustache game needs some work. Keep it up. I don't know. Anthony's pretty solid. If you want to make fun of my facial hair, the reddish brown is a little, it doesn't grow in as nice as the dark. I'm sure the Italian helps you out there. For me, the Irish skin and the light hair doesn't do it as good.
Yeah, the Italian in me, I'm a little bit hairy, but I like my mustache. I've been working on it. There's room for improvement. Admittedly, I did not shave for this episode. I'm going out to the casino on Saturday, so I'm planning on shaving and looking real clean on Saturday morning before I go out at night. That was the game plan here, but you're right. I do have a little bit of manscaping to do here, but I think that my mustache is pretty solid. I kind of like where it's at right now.
I think you should. And if you shave on Saturday, you should be looking pretty fresh for Monday's show then. Love
exactly.
That.
That's the game plan.
Good stuff. So yeah, both these teams pretty active. Both makes trades. Morgan Moses to the New York Jets. That should fill a starting offensive line spot. That's a thing of importance. Brian Burns trade. Big for the Giants. I guess next thing before we close out the show, or last thing before we close out the show, what do you want to see your team do next? So we'll do Giants first and then Jets. What should they do next?
Got to figure out CB2. Listen, I love Deonte Banks. I like Deonte Banks so much. I mean, if anybody's been viewing Fireside Giants for a while, before last draft, my final prediction for them was to take Deonte Banks in the first round. And I said, this would be a home run. This would be the perfect move. And then it happened. We were all excited. We were all celebrating. And I'm still excited about it. And I still think that Deonte Banks, tremendous talent. But it can't just be Deonte Banks in that secondary, right? I mean, of course, Xavier McKinney leaves, so you're missing your star talent on the back end at safety. Now they're going to kind of go, I guess, safety by committee, looks like, with a few of these younger guys on cheap contracts. But at cornerback, they've got Deonte Banks, obviously invested a lot in him with the first-round pick. But who's playing opposite him? You don't want just one good cornerback. You need two starters, and maybe even 3 in this NFL. It's a passing league. So yes, we mentioned how the defensive line helps the secondary, but even still, you need some good cover men out there. And Banks is great, but opposite him, I don't think they're going to re-sign Adoree Jackson. Adoree Jackson didn't look all that great last season anyway, but there are still some names out there in free agency. They're not high-end names, but maybe the Giants can monitor this market and find somebody. They need to. They need to get a CB2 in there. You have to have 2 reliable cornerbacks in this NFL. Yes, I like Trey Hawkins' 6th-round pick from last year. He showed a lot in training camp, didn't look as great in the regular season. That's fine. He's still developing. Not banking on him regardless. The Giants got to get a veteran presence in that cornerback room, and then I'll feel a lot more confident in this defense going forward. And then I guess lastly, I would say they need to figure out what the hell they're doing with Darren Waller. Darren Waller needs to figure out what he's doing with himself. Still mulling retirement. I think that he should have made that decision before free agency opened up so the Giants could have some sort of plan for their offense. But right now, I don't know what they're doing in the playmaker regard, like what they're building in the backfield with Singletary. They got to figure out a way to either add some talent at wide receiver or figure out Are they keeping Darren Waller, moving on from him, adding some talent there as well? So those would be the two spots I'd say. Look for CB2 and also look for a playmaker.
Jeffrey chimes in. This made me laugh. Garrett Wilson did cook Banks, but he was decent. But Banks, I like Banks. Banks is a good player. Cook might be a strong word. I don't know
strong.
if that game. I'd have to go back and look at the numbers, but it didn't jump out as a cooked game for me.
The one thing that I will say is potentially maybe he did get cooked, and that's fine if he did. He was a rookie, and Garrett Wilson is a really good receiver, so we're okay with him getting cooked against a guy like that. But what I will say is, in Wink Martindale's defense, very aggressive, very blitz heavy, a lot of man coverage. He didn't do his cornerbacks any favors, especially rookie cornerbacks. Asking Deonte Banks to play man coverage that often was silly to me. I always thought that the Giants should have played a cover 3 zone, just keep him on one side of the field, just have him shut down an entire sideline. That's what he did really well at Maryland. I felt like they almost played him out of position in some ways in this defense last year. So I'm hoping with this new defense, they're expected to play more zone, do more 4-man rushes and not blitz as heavy. Hopefully that leads to better performances out of Deonte Banks and really everybody in that secondary. So you might be right. You might be wrong. I'd have to go look back at the stats of the film on that one. Garrett Wilson's a really good player, though. But I think that Deonte Banks, the potential is there. The athleticism is definitely there. I think he's in store for a really good sophomore season.
7 for 100 might not be escaping the cooked allegations after all.
Maybe not.
It's quite okay. I want it known, Anthony. I am a Deonte Banks fan. All right, I will not have any Deonte Banks slander on the show here. I think he's a good player. For the Jets side of things, wide receiver is the next biggest thing that they have to do. The Calvin Ridley contract was insane. Kind of glad that they are not giving him $23 million a year, but Mike Williams cut from the Chargers. I know he was hurt last year. I think that's a name that the Jets should be looking at. Tyler Boyd may or may not have signed with the Steelers. I feel like that's been heavily linked. Your guy, what's up with Pretty Ricky? He's a Giants fan. Are you familiar with his game? Because he has been spot on so far.
Yeah, I am familiar with his game. So remember on Monday's show, I mentioned that there were rumblings of Brian Burns. Pretty Ricky, he messaged me on Friday night and told me that Brian Burns' deal was going down. So that's how I knew, and that's why I brought it up. I just didn't know if I could confirm it, so I didn't want to say, oh, it's happening. But I mentioned, hey, there were rumblings. I got it from Ricky. The guy knows what's going on. He's apparently got some friend who's working for some agency and feeding him a lot of insider info. But yeah, he's been spot on. He knew about Calvin Ridley. He knew about Brian Burns, and he's known about a few other deals as well. So I'm going to keep hitting them up for any info that I can get. But yeah, the guy definitely knows what he's talking about. It's pretty crazy.
So I just realized he follows me on Twitter. So I hit him with the follow back. He tweeted an hour ago, Tyler Boyd to the Steelers. So that dream very well could be dead for me. I'd be in on Boyd, but I think him going back to Pittsburgh, where he's from and went to college there, makes sense. But yeah, Pretty Ricky, the official insider of Big Apple Blitz, is reporting that he's off the market.
Yeah, and Ricky's been tweeting a lot about one receiver to the Jets. I'm not sure if you've been keeping up with what he keeps mentioning, but keeps tweeting about Odell Beckham Jr. So we'll see if it happens. He also tweeted a couple times about Marcus Valdes-Scantling, so maybe that could be the move that the Jets make. I'm not sure. And again, Ricky's still new to the insider game. His track record good so far. We'll see how it continues to develop, but sounds like OBJ and MVS are the guys that he's pinpointing for the Jets right now. But I think that I want to throw a different scenario out at you, Matt, and kind of get your take on this with
I wanted to toss up a phenomenal tweet from our guy Pretty Ricky. Aaron Rodgers seems to have affinity with 3-letter acronym names: RFK, MVS, OBJ. This isn't a politics tweet. Ricky doesn't dip his toes in that. Strictly sports takes, folks. Tremendous.
Wow.
I love this guy. But yes, sorry to
tweet. No, all good. It was a great tweet. But I want to throw this scenario out at you. So the Jets obviously needing to find a playmaker. And we kind of just talked about them having ultimate flexibility at 10. And maybe they trade up and go ahead and grab Joe Alt. How about the opposite? What if they trade down in this draft? They move back quite a ways. Maybe they target OT 3-4. Maybe you're talking Fuaga. Maybe you're talking Mims, moving all the way down and grabbing one of those guys, maybe getting a second-round pick in addition, and then maybe taking a wide receiver in round 2. How do you feel about that idea? Do you think that could be an option? Do you think maybe not, maybe too bold? How are you feeling about that scenario?
Can I choose my dream guys in each spot? Can I go like
Sure.
If I slide back, can I still get well, I was going to say Talisi Fuaga, but I don't know if he could play left tackle. I think he's more of a
Good
right
point.
tackle at the next level, and they just brought in Morgan Moses. That's my
Mims out of Georgia has played both, at least practice at both. So that's something worth noting.
Hasn't played a ton though. The injuries scare me a little bit, man, especially coming off of Mekhi Becton the last few years. That's slightly scary. Like at least Alton Fashanu have played left tackle. But like I was gonna say, trade back, and if I could get Fuaga and Lad McConkey, now we're cooking a little bit.
Yeah, I like McConkey a lot. I don't know if he makes it to the second anymore though, because all those wide receiver needy teams that are playoff caliber teams, they're picking in that back end of the first round. There's going to be a run on receivers at the beginning of the draft and at the end of the draft in the first round, I think. So we'll see if McConkey makes it all the way there. But that would be a great dream come true situation. How about Morgan Moses? Does he have any experience on the left side? Could he maybe do that?
Handful of starts in his career, like a couple, but pretty much exclusively right tackle. Unless, all right, we're gonna get real nuts. AVT goes back to left tackle. He played it at USC. He has one start in the NFL at left tackle. What if you go that way? Draft Fuaga, play him at right guard this year while Morgan Moses only has 1 year left on his deal. You kick him back out to right tackle in 2025, and then you get your receiver that way.
Or maybe even more interesting, you move him to left tackle, you trade down, take a receiver in the first round, go guard in round 2. There's some good guards, Christian Haynes, Christian Mahogany, the Christians. That's also an option. You could get really creative here if you're the Jets. And again, I think that's the value of signing these offensive linemen and trading for Morgan Moses. You have a lot of flexibility at 10, whether you want to trade up or down, and you get really creative. But maybe that's another option there. You take a receiver in round 1 at the back end. Definitely going to have some talent there, whether you're talking one of the Xaviers, whether you're talking Vlad McConkey as well. You could definitely get creative in that respect.
I love it. A ton of options left for both of these teams to go, both the Jets and the Giants. This has been a fun episode, Anthony. Thank you to everyone who's followed along and watched. There's still a lot of people in the live stream right now, so please leave a like, subscribe if you are new to the channel. Make sure to follow along Anthony's work over on Fireside Giants and at Anthony_Rivardo. I'm at Matt O'Leary NY, talking Jets, all that fun stuff. We'll do it again Monday, Anthony. How's that sound?
Sounds great. I'm looking forward to it.
Perfect. For Anthony, I'm Matt O'Leary, and we'll catch you next time.